So the first step for chip budding is to harvest your budwood. You'll want to do this in the early of the morning on preferably a cooler day. That's when the water content and the hormone levels are at its highest on the tree. So you'll need a plastic bag that has been misted to retain some moisture and some pruners that have been sanitized. So the first step is to walk up to your tree. If you have multiple trees, taking a look at all of them and picking the healthiest, most vigorous one, trying to stay away from any sort of disease wood as much as possible. We'll want to select first year shoots, so that's wood that has grown in this current year. And selecting wood that isn't necessarily going to compromise the structure of your tree for next year's production. So with peaches, for example, any wood that's growing straight into the middle or that might be chopped off is a good choice. So in selecting and looking at caliper, we'll want to select wood that is going to match the rootstock that we're working with as closely as possible. So it's a good idea to take a look at that rootstock and see what kind of caliper you're working with before you harvest the wood. Usually around pencil thickness is pretty key. So I'm gonna go ahead and select this piece over here. And another thing you want to look for is the firmness of the wood. Around late summer is when the wood is going to be at a good place. So a little bit higher up on the shoot is where you'll find some of that softer wood, and you can go ahead and just cut that off. You also want to make sure that within that first year wood you can see a bud that hasn't pushed yet, as that is the bud that we'll be relying on to push next spring. So if we're looking at this piece of wood over here, you can see some nicely tucked buds, and as long as the wood is healthy, you can get anywhere from 10 to 20 viable chip buds from a single shoot. So you can factor that into your decision when harvesting budwood. The next step is to just clean up and prepare the wood, and I'm just going ahead and cutting off all the leaves. Peaches and some other stone fruit will sometimes push secondary leaves as well, and that's okay. We're just leaving that petiole on, as that'll be an indicator later on as to whether that chip bud was successful. And as you can see up here, this first year branch has already pushed that bud and that lateral shoot, so we wouldn't want to use that. And yeah, that's pretty much a prepared piece of wood. And when you have enough wood, enough chip buds for whatever you're grafting that day, you'll want to place this back into the bag and store that bag in the fridge until you use it.
Alright, today we're going to show you the chip bud graft for fruit trees. We're working on peaches here this morning, and the first step is going to be finding where along this rootstock that we want to make the cut. So we like to do them somewhere in the 6 inches above grade range. So if you find a window maybe between 4 and 8 inches in that window, then you want to look for just a nice, even, smooth section of stem so that you can make a good, consistent, flat, straight cut. So right in here looks pretty good for what we're looking for, a nice cylinder. So the first cut, I'm going to make the lower cut, and it's going to be coming in at a little bit of a steeper angle with the knife. And notice my left thumb is going to provide all the force, all the power. So it's a short cut. The blade kind of flattens out as it goes in, and maybe a 1/4 inch or so in length. And then the knife's going to come up the stem, maybe 3/4 of an inch or so, and at that same steep angle it's going to enter the wood, and it flattens out quickly as well. And again, that left thumb generating all the force, and it should peel off a little sliver just like that. So you're looking for uniformity here, 2 parallel lines and a single flat plane, so that we can be consistent and make a similar uniform bud piece off of our bud stick that will fit into there exactly, or slightly smaller, but you want 2 flat planes that clamp together and have 2 perfectly even mating surfaces for the highest chances of success. So now that we made the rootstock cut, we pick up our bud stick here, and we want to look down the stem and find a bud that matches in size that'll fit this space. And I think this one will probably do it. And it's the exact same cutting motion to separate the bud from the bud stick. So I'm going to start with that bottom cut just below the bud. Again, this left thumb providing all the force. Knife comes up above the bud and the petiole. Nice even slice. Hopefully it peels off cleanly and easily. You can use your finger to hold that bud against the blade while you grab your petiole handle there, trying not to touch any of the cut surfaces to introduce any dirt or oils or anything like that. And hopefully the bud slips in nicely there. Looks like a pretty good fit in both length and width, making sure that the bud is not overlapping the bark of the rootstock in any dimension. For example, you would not want that to happen where the tip of the bud is protruding beyond your rootstock cut, or similarly a bud that was larger than your rootstock cut, so that it was hanging over the rootstock cut in the width direction. So you can see the bottom cut that we made, that lip cut, kind of holds the bud in place while you grab your rubber band, and we get ready to wrap it. Thumb kind of clamps it in place. We're starting at the bottom and working our way upward. First wrap goes on. I use that ring finger to sort of pinch the band in place until I can get a single full wrap. Once I get a full wrap, as long as I'm holding tension downward, should hold that bud in place. You can see that the tension of the band pulled the bud out of place a little bit, so take the time to adjust that as necessary to get it back in line. And then you just work your way up the bud. When you reach the petiole here, you're gonna kind of change the angle of the band to work it underneath the petiole, making sure that we cover up any of these little gaps or air spaces. We want to fully cover all the cut surfaces to prevent as much desiccation as possible. This band also provides the clamping pressure to get those 2 mating surfaces as close to each other as possible to speed up that callus formation and the unification of the 2 tissues. And so once I've wrapped fully beyond the tip of that cut surface, I just finish it off with an overhand knot. I like to put a bite on it like that, or a little slip knot, so that if I need to take this bud off next spring as it starts to swell, if this hasn't fully decayed away, you can pull that tip and it'll pop the rubber band off. And that's the chip bud.